Howdy. Obviously, you can tell by, maybe you can't tell. So some of this here is going to be predicated on the fact that Canadian Nuclear Labs is a research and development and commercial GOCO contract. So it's a joint venture between the Canadian government, federal government, and a commercial entity, which means we do research and development for both commercial customers as well as federal partners. So when you have that kind of paradigm, you have lots of different variability in the types of work that you do. And so that's going to be the basis and the genesis of the conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to take you on a journey, I think. All right, so I'm going to take you on a journey, and it's predicated on the fact that we need to recognize, of all the presentations and all the academic work that's going on right now, that this is the fastest we've ever gone. But it's the slowest we're going to ever go again. Now, that resonates because the data that I'm seeing from Fabian yesterday morning at the early morning plenary to the things that I'm seeing about BIM, the carbon capture, this information is becoming more and more readily accessible to us, which means we have more capacity and capability to do things differently than we've ever done before. The opportunity is that we still have 70% of projects failing. Fabian said that it was a $70 million project. Because they didn't think differently, it cost $800 million. Now, when we think about things like that, it doesn't mean that they didn't do the proper planning, that they didn't have meetings to think about it, but there's optimism bias at every step of the process when we go through and we say, I'm going to do this, and I guarantee that it's going to be done. I've got it written down in a briefing note or in a memo, in a contract. It's going to happen. But it never does, because life happens. The Art of War is a very good example of where the first arrow is loosed, it's different. And so we need to think about that from the standpoint of, how do we remove optimism bias? One of the really cool things is that AI and machine learning is an excellent opportunity to take that out as long as we know the facts behind the data that we're using, which is a lot of what y'all are doing, which is really exciting for me. Now, leveraging the data, slide's different. So when we're looking at the different pieces, we historically, we went back to see what else was done and where are we coming from. There's been lots of information and research done on big data. There's still even more to come. We're talking about it. The quintessential component of any big, large project like this with machine learning or AI is the cleanliness of the data. It belies everything that we want to do. And so the research, we looked at the framework, and so that's where we started. But when we get into even more, what performance metrics are you even looking for? We did lots of research on what is a good project. How do you determine what that is? Is it ROI, ROA? Is it a cost-benefit analysis? Is it CPI, SPI? You can look at multiple factors. Is it carbon capture? Is it sustainability? Risk management. Lots of little pieces of what y'all are talking about comes right back to how are we managing risk. It's no different here. And so when I look at this information, and we were looking at the historical, the heritage of the knowledge that we have before us because of the work that's been done by others, it was present that there's a yearning to do something more with the data that we have. Well, what did we do? Our objective was to say, we can do things differently. And we have tons and tons of projects, 700 projects of data that report on a monthly basis with cost variance, all sorts of different information with it over the last 5 years. But what did we do with it? What can we do with it? What we did identify is that there's too much variability between each individual project manager, for each individual quality control representative that's in the field, that each risk management professional that's engaged, it didn't matter who it was, even the executive team, you're going to have the executive stakeholder is going to be different for every project. So they're going to have different drivers and different subtle je ne sais quoi about what they're trying to do with that project. So you can't even say, well, this project did great because of these factors. This project did great because of those factors. There's always optimism bias in every situation, in every project that we looked at. So the question is, how do you take that out? Well, we said we're going to follow the full life cycle of the project. We're going to look at all these projects and we're going to see what we have. But how? Well, there's several key components that come into it. You have to understand the data sources. So we spent the last 3 years, it's been about getting to the source of the truth. What is the data and what is it really telling us? Where is this information at and how can we make sure that it's represented and repeatable? 700 projects get put in together, and can we get consistent information on it? Every project follows a standardization of Project Management Institute. You can look at the different things. There's a very standardized way of executing projects, so we knew that we could bend them and classify them in a certain way. But we also knew that there was going to be change requests and things that were going to constantly evolve, and that even though the project plan in the beginning was going to be there, it was going to change throughout the project, so we needed to be able to adapt to that life cycle effort. We also knew that there's governance, both the corporate governance from the executive team and what the company's going to say, as well as the project management governance that is a little bit further down in the organization that's going to tell them how to execute the project. That's going to have monthly progress reporting, they're going to have actual cost, and then they're going to have a financial system that they're going to need to work within. And that could be SAP, Oracle, it could be Quicken or QuickBooks, or it doesn't matter. There's an ERP that they're going to be working with. The end goal and the end output that you're always going to be able to do a taxonomy on is going to be the management reports, the things that come out of the project, what is consistently coming out of every project, no matter what organization. As I get into that, I'll tell you that we leveraged the earned value management system. It's internationally recognized as a system to track and earn progress on a project. But as we were doing that, we said, well, what are all the other factors that we needed to consider? The process of getting prepared to use machine learning on this became, when we started, we were thinking, we've got the whole world in our hands. We've got 700 projects, over 5 years of data. We have it all. But then we stepped in and we said, okay, let's lean in, let's figure this out. There was limited data. All certified project management professionals. Every project manager on these projects was a PMP certified project management professional. Incongruity in the data. It didn't matter because everybody has a personal preference in the tools and the systems and the approach that they're going to use. And so even though you can have an enterprise system that's flawless and super sexy, it doesn't mean that they're going to use it. Their spreadsheet's better than what you've got. And so that's what we found in the data. There was still stuff missing. And so although we thought we had everything we needed, we could not do everything we wanted. We wanted to use a large language model. We wanted to use NLP. There was RAG. There was lots of ideas and concepts. I was super excited. And then we got into it and we're like, no, we got to step back. So what did we do? Earned value management system is one thing that we know that is true and true every time. It can be there. It's already indexed. It's already something factual. And so my challenge to everyone here is that when we're looking at stuff like this, to use international standards and things that are already adopted by the industry to see what we can do next. How can we actually change the paradigm of the conversation versus leaving it up to chance that the data is going to be perfect? Because we already know that it's not. So what we did is we took CPI and SPI. We had two different models because they are inherently different data sources. And we said we're going to classify it in a binomial manner. It's either on track or it's not. And then we're going to combine it and say, is this project successful or not? Well, how did the results happen? Well, strikingly, I'm not going to go through what each one of these are because I had the pleasure of someone else doing it for me. So when we came out and we figured out that random forest was actually the better solution for this outcome. And of all the data that we had, all the data, the thing that bubbled to the surface 6 months into the project was September CPI and September SPI. Why is September so important is because we were looking at it from a fiscal year standpoint. You can look at a life cycle of a project. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. It doesn't matter the duration. But if you understand an organization and how they operate on a fiscal year budget. They're going to make determinations on whether or not they're going to proceed on a fiscal year determination. And so we wanted to know in a fiscal year determination slice, What did they need to know to be able to say, yes, you're still go, or no, you have a red light? So we wanted green lights only, but let's see how we can do that. And so when we, out of all that information, CPI and SPI at September, which is our fiscal year, was the one that said, hey, 6 months in, we can tell with relative certainty. Now, even with 700 projects, we still think that it's a finite element of understanding. And when you look at that, you need to consider why might that be. And I would say that's because the market segments, project types, project locations, there's too many variabilities of what that is. And so even though random forest came back really strongly as a strong indicator, I'd say that even more data is needed in order to provide more information that would be substantial to overcome some of the unique variabilities of the individuals and the teams and the locations and the markets in which these things are operating. So to kind of conclude here, what I wanted to really bring to the surface is that we did establish a machine learning model that is actually able to do the things that we said we wanted it to be able to do. And that's to help the executives and the project teams make a decision on whether or not they need to augment what they currently have in front of them to do something different, to pause it, to reevaluate, to take the optimism bias out of the equation as fast as possible. Now, a friend of mine that I met through when I worked at NASA said great work and great folly are indistinguishable at the outset. And so all the work that we're doing here at this conference and as well as in this particular project, we can't tell the impact that it's going to have on the future. But I implore you to continue to push the envelope and to think differently and to back up from what you're looking at and to say, maybe this isn't the right answer. And to try to keep that window and apparatus open as far as possible, aperture as far as possible before you get sliced into something very specific. In the end, when we finally finished the project, we finally went through a whole year. We just finished a whole year, so this was latent great results. We actually had a 10% improvement because we were able to use the data to indicate something was not right, and we reacted to it, which is very different than just going at the end of the year and going, well, that's another year. What are we going to do about that? And so in research, you can have a little bit more flexibility in that, but in a commercial space, you can't. So you have to have the predictability. And so I would say CPI and SPI is a great indicator as to what project success is going to look like, but it should not be the only measure that you're looking at. The next steps that we're going to be, John, adventuring into is around how do we actually take the variance explanations that we get on a monthly basis and incorporate that. So we're starting to augment the model to take those unique variabilities that we know that are really sporadic and pull in some new information. The risk management part that we think should be the golden goose. It should really tell us what that is, because it should be the silver bullet. The challenge is actually that risk management most often is only qualitative. There's no quantitative numbering behind it. You don't have actual folks that understand the statistics around what they're even doing to give you valid information. So be wary. Don't think that it's a foolproof answer. And that's whether you're in BIM and whether you're in sustainability, it doesn't matter. Those are very concerning for me because I see it in practice. But a 10% improvement in CPI and a 2% improvement in schedule is quite significant. That's it. I'm open for questions.